I'm on the Warner Brothers backlot, and I'm here to see Paul Feig do the Q&A and a screening of Bridesmaids as well.
Well, I've always been a pretty big fan of Paul Feig. I watched Spy, I watched Ghostbusters.
He's an amazing director, and I think it's just going to be really interesting.
Meeting people from the industry, it's like, you know, it's definitely a plus point.
My name's Eric Connor, I'm an instructor here, and you guys just got to see Bridesmaids. Yeah! Which is as poignant and as filthy as it was 5 years ago when it set the box office on fire. We got a real special treat for you here today. The writer, director, producer, Paul Feig, of course, to come. I got to say a few words about him. And before I say anything about him, I got to talk about Freaks and Geeks. Now, when Seth Rogen, you know, that deserves applause. Let's try again. Freaks and Geeks. Boom. Done. When Seth Rogen was here, I asked you guys, how many of you have seen Freaks and Geeks? A lot of you raised your hands, and a lot of you didn't. Now, how many of you have seen Freaks and Geeks since then? You can at least lie to me. The fact is, guys, by the next time I see you, I expect all of you to have seen it and read this entire book, because you will love it. It is one of the best shows ever created about high school life. Honest, poignant, ridiculous at times, just like our own high school existences. And the fact is, when you watch the show, you recognize yourself in it, your friends, your own life. So after Freaks and Geeks was over way too soon, unfortunately, after 1 year, Paul Feig went on and became director-producer for a number of terrific TV shows, including The American Office, Nurse Jackie, and then one of my favorite comedies also, Arrested Development. And that was just a precursor, though, to his remarkable film career. Bridesmaids, The Heat, Spy, Ghostbusters. Paul Feig single-handedly, it seems, with Judd Apatow, reminds Hollywood day in, day out, women are hysterical. And you can put them in a movie and it will make money. And it can be funny and poignant and dirty. It can have heartbreaking moments of friendship lost. It can have a moment like the dress shopping scene, which is so unbelievably dirty as well. And that scene at the end, which I realized I don't think I saw the first time I saw this movie.
It's only in the unrated.
I'm never gonna look at a hoagie the same way. Or Melissa McCarthy. Along the way, by the way, A Star is Born, Melissa McCarthy, who is like Robert De Niro to Paul Feig's Martin Scorsese. And if you guys saw Ghostbusters, I think Kate McKinnon is the new Joe Pesci. At least I hope so. Please cast her, please, again and again. Time and again, his films, though, find that beautiful balance of heart and humor. I was one of the first of my West Coast friends to get married and one of the last of my East Coast friends. Same marriage, by the way, just one. And so I can relate to this movie from every possible angle, except when we bought our tuxedos, we didn't have weird Thai food ahead of time, so we were okay. His work is so unique to him, so unique to his voice, his personality, and the idea that he's just going to keep making more of these is so exciting. I can't think of a better reason to go to the multiplex or turn on our TVs. So with Tova Laiter, producer, development exec, who's worked on Glory, she worked on Nixon, and she worked on Varsity Blues, football movie I quote all the time when playing fantasy football. They're going to talk for a bit, they're going to answer your questions, so let's bring them on. Tova Laiter and director, producer, writer, Paul Feig.
Everybody. Oh, no, my God. Thank you so much. You're very, very kind. Thank you. My gosh. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for coming out.
It's still one of the funniest laugh out loud comedies around, while, you know, at the same time, it's just deals with such a real way about female friendship and relationship. How did you get to direct this movie?
It was, you know, Judd and I knew, I've known Judd actually since he was 17 and I was a little older than that. And we always worked together, and when he was producing something, I acted in it, a thing called Heavyweights. And we always kept up. And then when I wrote the pilot, I wrote Freaks and Geeks as a spec script. And I had just a year earlier made a movie that I spent all my money on called Life Sold Separately, which has never been released. So, and I wanted to make a film. I was an actor for a bunch and many years, and was on a regular on a TV series called Sabrina the Teenage Witch, where I was a science teacher, Mr. Poole. I don't know if you remember that. Don't hold that against me.
Everybody has a past like
Yeah,
this.
exactly. That's right. We can't bury all of it. And so I had money, and I had about like $30,000 saved up from that show, and so I took it all and put it into this movie that I wrote. I wrote it to be very cheap. Now, $30,000, you could actually make something that would look better. You could, for $100, as you now know, with your iPhone, you can make something that looks way better than what I spent $30,000 on. Because I had to shoot 16 millimeter and all short ends and all that stuff. But wrote this movie that took place in a field. 4 people in a field in one day who go there because they all have heard a UFO is going to show up. And basically, I wrote it to be like the cheapest movie ever because, you had no lighting, one wardrobe change, and just, so we shot in 6 days. Judd saw that and was really impressed with it, and he had just signed a deal at DreamWorks TV and said, if you ever have a show or have anything that you think would be good for us to do, send it to me. And so when I wrote the pilot for Freaks and Geeks, I sent it to him, and he loved it, and then took it, and we made it. And so we had a great time doing that show. And then we just kind of kept up with each other, and it was about in 2007, he invited me to table read for this, which at that point had no title whatsoever. I think they were thinking of calling it Dishonored or something like that, which we all thought sounded like a war movie. And so, but he said, you should come see this because I know how much you like working, with female characters and all this. Because on Freaks and Geeks, Lindsay was always my favorite character to write. I always kind of felt most in touch with her. And so saw this table read, and ironically, Melissa McCarthy was one of the people at the table read, but I didn't even know who she was, and she didn't even read that part. She was just reading a bunch of different roles, as were all these other really talented women at the table. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, this is such a great vehicle for a bunch of funny women. And it had, the script was early days, so it had a lot of work that needed to be done to it. And so I gave a bunch of notes, and then Judd was like, would you, come on board and like help shepherd it for a year? And I was like, I was in the middle of another project, and so I said, no, but here's my notes, and just they should address them and then come back to me. And then it just kind of went away because all based on Kristen Wiig's schedule, because she was on SNL at that time, and it just disappeared for 3 years. And I'd called him up at one point halfway through and said, what's up with that? He goes, it's dead. So I was really bummed. And then out of the blue, and there's an interesting weird story. I've just been directing television that whole time. And having a great time. It's fun, but it still wasn't as satisfying as I wanted my own thing. Yeah. And at one point got hired to do these internet ads for Macy's. They were kind of like these short films about, at the time, their current celebrities who were doing a line for them, like Martha Stewart has this thing, and other people.
Oh, right, I remember that.
Yeah, and they were fun. It was like Martha Stewart goes to a frat house and she gives it a makeover, and they were funny. But one of the people was Donald Trump. Yeah, and it was a very funny thing. It was like he goes to a kid's bake sale at a school, and he gives it an upgrade, and he gets the kid a new suit and all this stuff. So it's funny, but I'd always heard like, Donald, he doesn't want to be, he wants to get out of there. You got to get there, and he's got to shoot him out fast. And it's like, so it was like in a panic the whole time. So I set up like the minute he walks through that door, we got a camera on him. He's going to walk in. We're going to do it. So he comes in, and I'm like the camera. I go and rolling. He goes like, wait, I got to get my makeup on. And so we got him through the day, but it was so stressful that I almost got a nervous breakdown at the end of it because I was just like, going like, where's my career? This is not what I want to be doing. And again, look, there's nothing wrong with doing something like that. I just been trying really hard. But so it was kind of this real low point for me because just to take a quick step back, I had done 2 films. One that was called I Am David. I
saw it.
Thank you. It was a drama. Again, I'm proud of all my children.
I loved it.
Thank you so much. No, I'm very proud of it, but it was hugely unsuccessful. It was a couple of years after Freaks and Geeks, and it was a drama about a kid who grows up in a communist labor camp, and it's just like, we did a test screening for it, and it went great. Like, it was packed, and it went great, and I was like, oh, we got a hit. And then as everybody is leaving, I see they're handing out these white envelopes to each audience member, and I said, what's the hat? And they said, well, when we told them what the movie was, nobody wanted to come, so we had to promise them each $5 to come see the movie. So you go like, well, okay, this movie's gonna bomb. And it did. And then I did a movie on this very lot called Unaccompanied Minors. It was this Christmas movie, and that bombed too. So I was firmly in movie jail. So that's just to give you the math on why when I kind of hit this low point. It was just like, oh man, my movie career's over and all this. And then out of the blue, that like right after the Trump thing, it was like the day of or the next day, I got a call from my agent saying, hey, that wedding movie is alive again. And yeah, I said, oh my God. And then Judd called me up and said, okay, we're going to do it. And just there we were. And I just had to meet with Kristen, who I knew. I actually cast Kristen in her very first film role in Unaccompanied Minors, in a tiny, tiny role. But I just kind of fell in love with her then, and I always keep up with her and visit her at SNL. And so I just went and had coffee with her to see if she was cool with it. And yeah, she wanted us to come on board. And then we really tore into the script because they hadn't done a ton of work on it since that first table read. And so she was off in New York doing Saturday Night Live, but Andy Mumolo, her writing partner, was with us here. And so we holed up at Judd's in his conference room, and just for a couple of months, just rewrote and just worked it hard. And I went through it and would send it back to Kristen, and then she and Annie would take our stuff and put it in their words, and then we just passed it back and forth because we're on this kind of hyper schedule because I came on board. It was probably the end of January, I think, or even the beginning of February, and we knew we had to start shooting in June as soon as she was off SNL. So we had a very small window. So it was a kind of a panicked rewrite, but it was fun because we were really hard on it. And and a lot of the most talked about scenes, the dress shop and the airplane sequence weren't in the original script. They came from us just kind of working it.
Really?
Yeah, I mean the dress shop was originally, it was a very funny scene they wrote that was like a fantasy sequence when Kristen's in the room, in a dressing room. She puts on this beautiful dress, and so she's looking at herself in the mirror and has this fantasy of like what her life would be like in this. But it's a really ridiculous thing where she's running through the woods and being chased, and at one point, like Matt Damon's shirtless and chopping wood, and he's like hiding my muscles, and she goes in. So it's very funny, but at the same time, we were kind of like, is it going to get us the juice we need for where she is in her life?
Right.
And the whole thing was, just loved working the idea of like you're trying to desperately preserve this friendship against this person who is way out of your league, this Helen character. And how do you try to keep up with that? Do you try to match her? And so this seemed like the most fun way to illustrate, I don't have any money, but I'm going to throw this lunch, but I have to show it at a shitty place because I don't have a lot of money, but I'll sell it like it's a great place. And then it's really the fruits of what happens when you try to be somebody you're not, told in the most ridiculous way possible.
Yes.
Just because we sat around and said, like, okay, how can we make this, when you're making a commercial comedy, you need to find set pieces. And you need to tell, whenever you can, to tell a small story point or character point in a big way, just because you want to get big laughs and all that. And for us, it was never about, and even Kristen, when we were putting this together, the day before we shot it, Kristen was like, can we not shoot this? It's like, look, this is not about shitting and puking. This is about putting on airs, and about the comedy for us was always, what happens if something horrible is happening and everybody wants to pretend it's not happening? Yes. That's what's the funny part. Yes. And we said, look, we're going to shoot a bunch of throwing up and all that stuff. We might not use any of it. We might use a ton of it. Test screenings will tell us, but we have to have it because we're not going to be good if we don't have it. And so shot it, and and Kristen's just so genius at some of that, all of that stuff, anything physical, and we played around a lot, and so that came out of it, and then we got that. And then the
Add Melissa to this.
Oh my God! I mean, Melissa's just a force of nature, really. And I had never seen her before, other than that table, which I didn't even know who she was. She would, I didn't talk to anybody up at that table, and back then, and so I'd never seen her. And it was when we were casting that role. We'd been casting for a while and saw tons of funny people, but nobody kind of cracked it. And it was very late in the game that Kristen and Annie said, oh, you should see our friend Melissa. She's regular at the Groundlings. People, line up around the block whenever she's performing. And she came in and did this audition that was so, I couldn't even process it at first. Because I was like, oh, that's weird. Like she's playing it so kind of, earthy, for lack of a better term. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. She's playing a gay. That's an interesting thing.
Yes.
Way to do Megan. And then I always do an improv component of it. And so it was like, okay, well, let's do a thing where actually you're trying to convince Annie to go hang out with you that night. And so she's like, yeah, we're gonna go out and get all these men and we're just gonna eat them up alive. And I was just like, wait, so is she gay? Is she not? What's going on? And it was just such a great
Right.
kind of fully dimensional character that we just like, okay, she's in.
Right.
And then what I do when I work is like to get together a couple months before, and we'll do rehearsals, read through the script, and improvise, and just let them improvise on a version of the scene so they can start to own the characters. And we can start to hear as writers, oh, this is where they're going. Oh, they have this. And you start to see the natural dynamics come out between them. Because, we can write the greatest script in the world, but they've got to, they've got to perform it, and the chemistry has to come across on camera.
Right.
So out of that, we started seeing this character, for all of them, but for Melissa especially, was such kind of this force of nature and just kind of, no nonsense and sort of the most sensible, weirdly sort of the most noble of the bunch. And that scene where she beats Annie up on the couch was originally written for, we had a runner where this call center, this bill collector in Mumbai, was calling, and she kept like avoiding the call, kept hanging up, and then it was supposed to be that woman calls, and then she's like, "Don't you hang up on me!" And basically, she gives her the life lesson over the phone. But it always kind of bothered us of like, well, it's a third-party person we don't know. She's not in the room with her, and then it was like, God, we've got this Megan character, so we rewrote it to have her come over and do it, and then obviously it just went, it just took it to the next level. And then just to finish up on the other set piece, the airplane was originally, for the longest time, it was always that they went to Vegas and they had this whole adventure in Vegas. At one point there was another bridesmaid who was this young woman who actually Brie Larson was going to play, and then we ended up realizing it was right when the Hangover had just come out like the year before, and we said, you know what, they nailed Vegas so perfectly that like all we're going to do is get compared to the Hangover.
Right.
So it was just kind of brainstorming, go like, what if they don't get there? What if she just freaks out on the plane and they never get there? And I was in the middle of of location scouting and everything, and we talked it out, and then I remember saying to Annie, like, would you write up just, a version of this? And I was out on location scout, and those pages came in pretty much as is, minus some of the improving that everybody did. And I just thought it was so funny, with the whole colonial woman on the wing, and that it just, it just turned into this great thing. And, so that it's that thing with comedy, which, as you're developing a script, as you're looking at it, as you get your cast together, you really have to be hard on how you're going to make it funny, how you're going to service the characters, what's the funniest way to get their story across and get their emotional journey and arcs out there, but still in a funny way. And then how do you undercut things? How do you surprise the audience? And it was a really cool process putting this together.
I'm going to ask you one quick question, then I'm going to open out the student because it's for them really. Is there a difference in directing female actresses than male actors? No,
there really isn't. I mean, talented people are talented people, and it's the problem is just that women have been denied these great roles, great three-dimensional roles for so long. And it's the few times they get it, either they have to be superhuman or whatever. Yeah. And no, the problem is that there's this wealth of really talented actresses out there, and they were just waiting for roles, and especially comedy people. And that what was so fun about this is like, here's a forum where we can really, let them play. Yeah, but that's the biggest thing, is just harnessing their personalities. That's why I love people who do comedy, because even like, look, Rose Byrne, that's not Rose Byrne, clearly. Yes. That's with an accent, and she's playing this other character. She's one of these people who is so funny once she finds a character that she can improvise and play within that character. Yeah. But then, other actors are just, you pull their personality out, or you go like, oh, here's a side of your personality that I think is funny. Yeah. And then you write to that. So when they step on the set, they slide right in. And then you can just start playing, and you don't have to
bring the best of
then you don't have to kind of discover and kind of fine tune on the set. Then we can just plus it up on the set.
I thought because you dress so dapper on the set that they're all listening to you.
Oh, nobody listens to me.
This is how he dresses on the set.
Yes.
None of that T-shirt crap.
That's right. One extra hurdle for you if you want to direct is. wear a suit and try to keep it clean.
If you look at pictures of Hitchcock, this is how he dressed, you know?
I like it old school like that.
Yeah. Okay, we are going to open up for student. Can you please line up?
Hi, my name is Gayana Char. First of all, such a pleasure and honor being here. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I have a question, which is the following. Have you ever had a situation where you had to fire a crew member or an actor on a spot? If so, why? And if not, maybe you've heard or known of a similar situation.
That's an interesting question. That's a loaded question. I mean, for me, crew-wise, I run a very happy set because I was an actor for many, many years. And anytime I was on a tense set, I found that I wasn't at my best. I would kind of shut down and I would, so I'm very hung up on like making sure that there's no angst on the set. Even if there's angst that needs to be behind the scenes. I don't want it getting to the actors. And honestly, I don't want it getting to me on top of it because, when you're doing comedy, you have to be in the way that I do comedy, which is we're doing things so much in the moment, coming up with jokes and really working and doing improv and all that. It needs to be a fun, supportive, situation. So I guess it's really been just the times when somebody's been a drama person who brings a lot of angst to the set. That's when we're kind of okay. You gotta go. Actor-wise, I've been pretty lucky. I've had a few situations. Well, no, oh God, actually I did. I won't name names, but no, there was somebody who showed up. Oh God, it was a scene in a different movie that had a lot of dialogue that had to be gotten. It was very expositional dialogue, but it had to be gotten through in a fun way, as much as fun as it could be. And this poor person, we were shooting in another country, and I don't know if it was just a combination of jet lag and maybe some antidepressants. I don't know. Could not do it. And I had to literally spoon feed every single line. And so by the end of the day, we're just exhausted. And you're like, we got it all. It's like, yeah, we got it all, but there's no performance there. We just got all the words we needed. And so that was probably the worst because we literally send somebody home on a plane, to another country. So it's tough. I mean, here's the thing: get really good producers or have good line producers because they can do your dirty work for you. And that's the best I can tell you.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a great question, sir.
Hello, Paul.
Hey there.
Thanks for coming. That movie was amazing. I'm Guillermo. I'm a BFA screenwriting student. You can call me Memo.
And I will.
I just had a question. I just had a question in terms of writing. Like in TV or movie, what's your process, like from getting to idea to an actual feature? Like, your guidelines or if you outline or not?
Yeah, I mean, it's. You know what? The process is different for every project. I've got some projects I've written that I've heavily outlined and treatmented. Others that I literally kind of had the germ of an idea and went in and Spy, literally, I kind of knew kind of where I wanted it to go, but it was more fun to kind of write it because then I could actually discover it and find surprise myself because I wanted it to have kind of twists and turns. And that one kind of poured out. But then I've had other times I've stranded myself in the middle of it's page 60, and you're like, oh my God, what did I just do? Just happened very recently, actually. And so it's really kind of where you catch the energy for it and what your vision of it is. And that's kind of a not a great answer to that. But I like to start with the characters. That's in general, I find I'm less successful when I come up with a situation first and then plug characters into it versus like, I want to tell a story about this person who's going through this. Then you go, what's the most effective way and the most active way I can then tell that story? So that it's not just a talky thing, that it's got some sort of, framing device or some big context to it. But it's really case by case. But if I was going to say anything, characters first.
That was an amazing answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Anna.
Hey, Anna.
I wanted to ask that which one of your films did you enjoy working on the most?
Children.
I know which one of my children I love the most. Don't tell the other ones. I mean, I have to say, I think pound for pound, I enjoyed Spy the most because it was just fun. I mean, I like doing action stuff, and I'm always my thing is always trying to figure out like how can I take comedy to not the next level sounds so highfalutin, but just, I mean, out of just being talky. You know, how can I kind of make it physical, and how can I kind of make it suspenseful? And, you know, my favorite thing is when you kind of, people are like, you know, scared or screaming and laughing at the same time. You know, even in Bridesmaids, you know, that's that thing when you get in the dress shop where you're just like, oh my God, it's to get that kind of a reaction out of an audience is very, very fun. So I enjoyed that. And I loved doing the action on it. But this one was a blast because this cast was so deep, you know, and the talent was so big, and the amount that we were able to play because it was a slightly more dialogue-driven movie allows us to really play around with a lot of alts and a lot of improv and a lot of dialogue that way. So hard to pick, but that's probably Spy was the most fun, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Feig. My name's Santiago. I'm in the filmmaking department. I just wanted to ask you if you could give any tips on how to direct improv and how to keep the continuity without having a nightmare when you edit the film.
Yeah, that's a great question. Here's the thing. Improv is a very slippery term, because improv sounds like you just make the whole thing up. It's not. You have to have a great script, or if you're going to do one of those ones where you kind of, you know, free form it, you got to have a great outline, because you have to know what every scene has to accomplish. It needs to be a roadmap, and you need to know each scene, as you know, has to be point A to point B, and we need to learn something or establish something or get something out of the characters in there. So if you have make sure you got a great scene, then let it just start to waver a little bit. I mean, obviously go in and just try to get it as scripted, but then let them just start to play. And sometimes it's just literally loosening up words. The way I do it too is we'll have like a list of alternate jokes we've already written. I always have the writers on set with me. I never don't allow the writers to be on set because they've got Post-it pads. They're handing me notes because they're thinking of jokes. Because that's the thing is once you're there and the cameras are there, that's when the magic happens, you know, and I'm very I'm not anti it, it just doesn't work for me, but, you know, there's so many directors, especially when you're starting out, if you're a writer-director, you just, you know, you love your words so much, and you know, it's true, you do write a great script, hopefully, but still, I always keep a bust of Shakespeare on my desk to remind myself that I'm not Shakespeare, and nobody I work with is Shakespeare, so we can all play with it, and so you want to be completely in touch with those actors in front of those cameras as they're starting to discover the scene and discover new things about the scene. And the number one thing, if you're going to do improv, is try to cross shoot. And you guys know what that is, obviously where you shoot both. DPs hate it, so you got to find DPs that will do it. And Bob Yeoman, thank God love him, that's why I've done 4 movies with him, will do it. And because, you know, like that opening scene where they're, you know, in the coffee shop, that was just 5 hours of cross-shooting them at this table, and they're, you know, doing the scene, and they start to loosen it up, and then I'm throwing in things like, we'll talk about, you know, sex that night, and then suddenly Kristen imitates a penis, you know, and Maya laughs, and I'm getting it all on camera at the same time. So that energy feels so natural, and as the audience, you so invest in that friendship between them because you see they're really friends, and it allows us not to have all this clunky exposition about, you know, oh, I've known you for 20 years and we're best friends. So just to kind of finish up on your question, it's really just have a strong structure to the scene you're doing and then play within it, and let the actors, you know, there's nothing I love more than when I've tapped out a scene. I feel like, oh my God, we've exhausted this, and an actor says, oh, can I try one thing? Because a lot of times that's kind of a great thing, and it takes them sometimes that whole time to discover it. And I always say, you'll know when you're doing a good job when the crew wants to murder you, because they're just like, oh my God, they've heard this, you know, scene a million times. But again, it doesn't matter. They're just used to hearing. I'm always nervous about a comedy where like this crew's always cracking up and laughing. A lot of times they don't make good comedies because you're not performing for the crew, and it's all about what you're going to surprise the audience with and what moment you're going to pull out in the editing room. And the other final thing is get a great editor and let them do their thing. You know, because they'll pull out takes and jokes that you wouldn't think are funny. Or it could be something on set you're like, that was the stupidest thing, I'm not using that. If suddenly they go like, this is really funny, try it, you know, and then just test screen as much as you can, show it to as many people as you can.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Daniela Lavender, one-year program. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
What are the qualities you most treasure in a producer?
Oh, well, that's a great question. Somebody who can keep a lot of problems away from me. Because when you're prepping and all that, you want a great producer on your side. My producing partner Jesse Henderson is amazing, and they are your partner, and they need to see what you need, and they need to be respectful and believe what you need, and they have to be strong enough to see what you might not need, or to see where you have to cut a corner, or to be able to keep you on track. Because it's hard. As a director, you want the world. I mean, I'm a producer-director, so I'm more in touch with it a little bit, budget-wise and all that. But at the same time, still, I have moments of like, I don't care, I want this thing. And a good producer will know and love the movie and the story so much that they will say, you know what, you need that too. And sometimes I've had it where I go like, forget, we can't afford it, let's get rid of it, where a good producer and a good line producer will say, you know what, it's too important, we'll find it somewhere else, and they'll figure out, maybe you don't need this thing over here. And they'll give you a lot of horse trade moments of like, which do you want? Do you want this or that? But the best ones are never punitive, I find. The producers I don't like working with are the ones that are just so about the budget that you don't get the feeling they care about the project. So really find somebody that gets the project, and then just keep a nice trust. And it should never be contentious between you and a producer, And if it is, then maybe it's the wrong producer.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Ravina. I'm doing the MFA producing. And I had a question for you. My question is, you've been a director for some films. You've been the executive producer for a few films. So how does your approach change when you're interacting with your crew, or when you're interacting with your actors, depending upon the role you play in the film?
Yeah, well, when I'm producing, I try to be as respectful to the director as I can, and kind of not, because again, as a director, I've worked with ones that are just on top of you. And the best, again, it kind of goes back to the best producers I've worked with. They are great storytellers, or they know story, or they're really good at pinpointing problems in stories. Like Judd is a master at like something's wrong with this, and he's like, it's this, and then I'm really good at going, okay, good, and now I know how to rewrite it, and then go off and do that. Right. And so I guess it's when you're producerial, guide and be supportive and be the adult in the room sometimes, but don't micromanage. And it's hard because when you're a director, it's really hard because you go like, I would do it this way, but you have to say, all right, that's how I would do it, but I'm not this director. And and if you've hired a director that you trust, and that's what you should do. Don't hire somebody you don't trust, because then it'll be a disaster. Then get out of their way and guide them and let them do their thing. And just the biggest thing is to make sure that filmmaker is getting everything they need. That's the only time. I always say to everybody, like, if we don't shoot it, we don't have it. So I'd rather you shoot it, even if we think we're never going to use it. If we have time, get it, because I'd rather not have to then more expensive go back and do a reshoot, or even grab pickups or whatever. I always like to try to get everybody to get their pickups, and inserts if you can. But make sure that they're armed with enough, so they can go in. And then as a director, I just like to do my thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sonakshi, and thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to ask you, when it came to directing actors versus directing experienced comedians, was there any difference in directing them? And if so, how did it help to bring out the funny? Both ways.
Well, that's another great question. It's with sometimes people who are really funny. I don't know, the funniest people I work with are actually really good actors, weirdly. But occasionally I've come across some who you find struggling in something that's more serious or whatever. And almost always I'm just like, do less. Just stop trying, because people naturally will just bring this great energy, especially if they have this other side of the talent. It's when they go out of their comfort zone and they feel like, I've got to push, or I've got to, be this, or they've worked it too hard. And it's really just kind of guiding them. But again, that safe environment is the best way to do it. Because I always say that's my, I don't know if I said that already, that the biggest job as a director is to create a safe environment that the actors feel they can try anything in and they can fail in. And you know, the minute I would if I would say, you know, what are you doing? No, that's wrong. Like, everybody would shut down. Because I had directors do that to me when I was an actor. And it's just like, oh my God, like, okay, I'm not trying anything now. And then you just tense up. Let them try everything and don't ever be punitive with them. Always, to me, even when somebody tries something that's bananas, I'm like, okay, cool, we got that. That's great. Let's try this and let's try an opposite of that. I've had some actors I've had to soft soap into a performance because they think this one thing they're doing is great. And it's like, that's really good. Let's just try one more where just like super minimal, just so I have it. We'll never use it, you know. And then that's always the one I end up using. So you know, it's soft soap in that way. And then as far as actors trying to be funny, it's the same thing but with funny, which is when they start trying to be funny, it's a disaster. Every time somebody tries to be funny, it's not funny. You know, that it becomes what we call sweaty in the business. They go, oh God, that's such a sweaty moment. Somebody working so hard. But again, that's where you go, don't try to be funny. If you have a funny script, that's why it all comes back to the script. Without a script, you're nothing. You got nothing. And if you got a great script, I mean, you know, Jason Statham in Spy was a perfect example of this. I mean, you know, he came in when I was doing my rehearsal reading process, and you know, he was kind of nervous, and so he's like, so do I try to be funny? I said, Jason, treat this like it's one of your other movies, literally. So he sits down with the script and he just starts reading it like he was doing The Mechanic or, you know, any of those things. And I'm just like, so he read through it once. I said, like, close the script and leave and don't do anything. Like, you're done. This is that you played it perfectly. And it was like, had he tried to joke that at all, it would not have been good. But so yeah, just less is more. Don't let the non-funny actors try to be funny, and don't let the funny actors try to act too much. Save everyone from themselves.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great.
Hey, Paul. I'm Tony Schwartz, producing faculty here, and I have a unique perspective on you. I don't know that you remember. I was your second AD on Freaks and Geeks.
Oh my God! I thought I recognized you.
Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know about Paul, he's genuinely probably in the top 3 nicest people that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. My question is, can you talk a little bit about what happened, the experience with Freaks and Geeks and NBC and their decision to cancel it way too soon? Again, for those of you guys who don't know Freaks and Geeks, one of the greatest shows ever on television. It was brilliant. It was genuine. It was thoughtful. It was unique, and ended way too soon.
And
so,
look at
if you can share a little bit about NBC and what the decision, how the decision came about.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting time. It was. I always hate to say this because it sounds like we're so cool, but we were ahead of our time just because that tone and that type of show wasn't being done then. Yeah, we were this really bad, perfect storm of game shows had suddenly become the biggest thing on TV. There's a show called Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? I don't know if you remember that. That was the biggest show on TV. I mean, it just was blowing everything else out of the water. And it cost, $1 million, I guess, if somebody wins to make. And otherwise, it was pretty cheap. And so their appetite for spending a lot of money on things that were difficult sells was very low. We were put on Saturday night at 8 o'clock. Yes, which was pretty much the death slot for a show about high school, because nobody in high school or cares about high school is home watching TV at 8 o'clock on Saturday night. And this was, pre-TiVo and all that stuff. I mean, if you wanted to VHS it, you could, but, nobody cared. I'm sorry. And, but we just kind of, we made them, how hard we worked on those things, and we treated each one like it was a little independent film. I mean, we killed ourselves on that show. But we were always low rated. I mean, we were just always at the bottom of the ratings. Ironically, our lowest rate, our normal rating was 7 million people, which now would make you a hit. You would be good. But back then, forget it. It was just, we were low. And I mean, I credit NBC for kind of keeping us on as long as they did, really. I mean, we had the 13 order, and then they gave us ordered like one more.
And then three more, I think.
Three more, and then another. So they were kind of slowly doling it out. But that's what allowed Judd and I to go, look, I think the writing might be on the wall. You know, and he said, like, you should write the final episode and direct it. And actually, as you remember, we actually shot the final episode way out. We shot it like before we shot the final 3 episodes that we did, just because we didn't know if they were going to pull the plug at any moment. So I was at least able to kind of end it. But yeah, it was just an expensive show. And
do you feel like the network was a little fearful because you were so new and groundbreaking, and that they just didn't want to stick with it?
Yeah, well, it was the head of the network was so frustrated with our show because, I mean, he took Judd out to lunch one time. He's like, why can't they ever win? Why can't they ever have a victory? Because we have one episode where like the lead kid Sam is in love with the cheerleader, and he looks like he's going to be on a date with her, and then they go out, and it turns out it's all because she just wants to say how much she's in love with the head football player, and she tells Sam like, oh, you're just like my best friend, you're just like my sister, and he's like, you know, and the guy was like, so, I mean, you got this thing, and he's out with the cheerleader he's in love with, and then she says she's into someone else. Like, why can't? It was like, what? How could our show possibly be our show if like our nerd gets the girl 6 episodes in, you know? So they just kind of didn't understand it, and it frustrated them. And but you know, at the end of the day, if our ratings had been big, they would have put up with anything. But low ratings and a show they don't really understand is a recipe for the disaster. So.
Especially on a network today, on the cable, it would just thrive.
Yeah. And plus, I mean, also, this was before like a show would come out on DVD or be put out on video after the season was over. If we had that, I think we could have done that, because I directed on the first season of Mad Men, and it had no ratings that season. But I remember saying to them, like, if you put this out on DVD, this show's going to go through the roof. If people just have to binge watch it and find it. So much better prospects to keep a show on the air today, and TV is the way to go, man. I'm telling you. I mean, the storytelling on television now, because you look, the most successful shows are just in really long movies, because TV used to be so hung up on you couldn't serialize the storytelling. Every episode had to be a one-off, complete. And now, because of binge watching and the internet and all this stuff, now they've thrown that out, and that's why these shows work so well.
Anyways, good to see you again. Thank you.
So good to see you, Tony. My gosh, what a pleasure.
Okay, next.
Hello, my name is Timothy Herrera. I'm with the acting department. As a director, what qualities do you look for in actors?
Good question.
Handsome, smart.
I know. These amazing questions. Wow, this is a great school. I live very nearby here, and I always see you guys walking around. So I'm glad to finally meet you. I see your bags, and I know it's you. You know what? I look for whoever can be really honest and really effortless. And can bring something to the character. That's why when I'm at a point now where I kind of have just like a group of people. I like to just go, let's put them into this, especially for the little parts, because I know what they can do. But it's still really fun to find new people, and it's finding people who bring something extra to the game, because I don't want to just shoot the scripts, as hard as we work on it, and I'd rather get somebody and fine-tune a part to them. I mean, this is a good bit of advice that I learned way back when we were doing Freaks, which was, if you've got some role or you've written and something in your head, and somebody comes in who's awesome and they're not at all what you thought the role was going to be, hire the awesome person. Don't throw them out and go like, let's wait and see when the person who matches is in my head, because the audience doesn't know what's in your head. They don't care what's in your head, and if you let somebody great go, you're an idiot. And that happens with us with Jason Segel on Freaks, because he came in, he was a complete opposite of what I had written for that role, what I envisioned and everything, and it was just like, he was so good, and Judd I was like, I don't know, he's not quite right. And Judd's like, let's rewrite the role. I was like, yeah, you're right, let's do that. So I look for that, and then just really when I do auditions, I always have a little bit of an improv component in there. What I like to do, here's one of the tricks I like, is, you have the scene, you have them read the scenes, but I'll always write something that's not in the script, a monologue, or an interview where it's like somebody somebody asks a question and then they give a long answer, and they ask one more question and they give a long answer. And I give it to the actors and say, this is yours. Do with it what you want. It does not have to be word per. I don't care. Like, take it. But then you really get to see their personality, because they're unbridled by interruptions and having to act and having to be in the moment. And it's actually, you learn a lot about somebody. And that's for like big parts, especially when you're doing a TV show, but on a movie too. Because then you'll just really start to see what natural gifts they bring to it, and then play with that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And be on time on the set.
Yes. Yeah. And hit your marks.
Hi, Paul. Thank you so much for coming and sharing this wonderful information and insight. My name is Cricket Rumley, and I'm on the screenwriting faculty. And there are a number of screenwriters here today in the audience. Thank you for that small round of applause. And so William Goldman famously said screenplays are structure, and we certainly teach the importance of structure in writing a screenplay. But how do you work with screenwriters to get off of structure and get into what makes a script really delicious?
Oh, wow, that's another great one. It is so much about structure, but writing a script is like it sounds so over the top, but it's kind of like putting together a symphony, because to me, scripts are so based, on story and obviously on character, but also on rhythm and musicality. And I find that it's just like going through a script and you just feel that those off beats, or you feel where you're like, we're missing something here. And it's really about, God, it's hard to kind of give a definitive on that, because you kind of know it's missing when it's not there. And again, if you're always in service of the characters, that's structure. My problem with a lot of movies is that they're so story-driven that it's about events. And so you structure the events so that they can affect the characters, and then that's why you end up with ridiculous things like, now we need to do a character pass, or let's have a table for a character. And it's like, no, if it's not about the characters, then the events are kind of meaningless, or then it's just mayhem that we're going to hope that we relate to the characters within it. So I think for me, this is a cloudy answer to your question, I'm sorry, it's about the characters first. So it's like, I always want, what are they going through to drive the events? So if I literally go like, here's their story, here's what I want them to get to, here's the problems they're having, and then you say, oh, now what thing could happen to them that would take them to the next thing, or what would be the good challenge that would illustrate this, or what would take them forward, and do it that way. That's probably the way I face it. And then it's really just making sure that you get a three-dimensional performance out of your characters. And it's really loving the characters. And the biggest thing for me is, don't ever write with contempt for your characters. Even when you're writing a villain, the thing I say, it's out of the back, George Bernard Shaw, when he writes plays, in the back he has all these little maxims he writes. And there's one, it's just 4 words, it says, all men mean well. And to me, that is the key to writing, because it's like, no matter who the people are in the movie, what the character is, if they're doing something terrible, they have a reason for what they're doing. They're not just mustachioed like, I'm just going to create havoc. And if they are going to create havoc, they have a reason why they're creating havoc that they think is a good reason. And so I think if you kind of hold everybody to that litmus test, and I just did a panel, I was at the Austin Film Festival, which is an amazing panel for screenwriters.
Terrific.
That. Yeah. I was on a panel with Nancy Myers, who's a friend of mine, and we were talking about this, and she gave a really interesting answer that when she's going through a script, gets it all written, then she'll spend a couple of days just literally being one of the characters. And so she'll go through the script as if she's that character, and make sure that everything they're doing makes sense, that they are fully fleshed out, that they are that an actor would read it and want to be it because it's rich enough. And she does that with every character and takes a couple of days for each one. And so then you get very honest portrayals, and you don't have those things where you're like, well, why would that character do that? Or that's just a boring character. And then they start interacting in a way that is realistic, and they mean something. Everybody's got something that means something. I just don't like when a movie is too surface, and sometimes it happens. And you know, I mean, even in Ghostbusters, we had so much script. Our first cut was like 3.5 hours long, and I had to lose so much of my character stuff that I liked, and I'm still proud of it. But it's it hurt us a little bit. So you really, again, that script is so important, and getting that right and getting it right in the time. And beware of scripts that are too long, because obviously you want to overshoot a movie, but if you will no matter what happens. So don't worry about that. And just really be hard on it. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, that's very helpful.
Squishy
structure coming out of characters naturally and organically moving through their lives.
Yeah, I'm a big Sid Field proponent. I mean, I think 3 actors. I've got no problem with that whatsoever. And but you can twist it and play with it, but that 3-act structure, it works, and it's just how you kind of fudge with it and hide it, but it's good. But again, this is the biggest thing I always want to say to any of you guys, is this is all just advice that works for me or has worked for me. You're going to discover things, and it doesn't mean just like, screw the rules, I'm throwing everything out. But at the same time, learn it all, know it all, but then you know what? Somebody else is going to break the rules, and something great will come out of it if it's really heartfelt and if it's really coming from a place of passion and a place of understanding. So rules are all meant to be taken with a grain of salt. Learn them, but then twist them. Because I had so many times in my career, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, and then, okay, and then somebody else does exactly what I was told not to, and they have a big hit, and you're like, wait, and they're like, well, yeah, it worked for them. It's like, okay, well, thanks for that.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, last question.
Hey, Paul. Max from Australia. Everyone's questions were great, and thanks for coming. Mine's not as good, but I was going to say,
like that.
after getting a take that you wanted during a scene, is it usually the in the final edit? And I think you answered this semi with through improvisation and things like that. But if not, how often do you find yourself on the cutting floor using takes you initially thought were unusable?
All the time, constantly, and that is why you need to create that environment and let everything happen, because I've had so many times where I'm just like, oh my God, what are they doing? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But if I'd cut it off or like thrown it out, you get in the editing room and suddenly you're like, oh my God, that's hilarious when I mix it in here, or tonally it goes here. And that's the biggest thing, is make sure you cover yourselves with your takes tonally and attitude-wise. Beware of, I always hate in those old movies, like, the director, and cut, that's it, we got it. It's like every time I've done that, I've never used that take, ever.
Yes.
Ever. Because what you want to do is, you don't know how, I'm always saying on the set, because we have really great days on my movies, and, everything, get funny stuff, and you always walk away, and the studio loves the dailies, and everybody's happy, and I'm always going like, yeah, let's just see if it adds up. And that really is what it comes down to, because, individual scenes on their own could be hilarious. You string them together, and suddenly something's wrong, or that suddenly the scene that was the funniest scene becomes just deadly, and you're like, where did that happen? And sometimes it's something that's way down here, sometimes came before, sometimes in the scene. But the biggest thing is just, you don't know where you do, but you want to have some leeway for where those characters are going to be at that point in the movie. And so it's good to get kind of the bigger take and get the smaller take, and really get a range, because you want to be covered. You want to get that editing room and have options, because if you don't, there's nothing worse than when you put it together and you kind of got one way to do it, and then you screen it and it's like, oh, we got a problem. So just better to shoot it than not to shoot it. And don't try not to cut off creativity, because you never know what you're going to use.
And plus, you can always put it in the outtakes of the DVD. And that's why you should all really watch the DVD, because it has the most amazing outtakes. And I want to say it's 5 years since this movie is released, right? November 14 or something, did it come out?
Yep.
And it's still incredible and incredible.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much. No, we wanted...
Thank you, guys. Keep making movies and tell great stories.